Good morning. My name is Miss Ellie Blair White, and boy, do we have some very critical issues brewing this morning. So please buckle up, take some notes, and we'd like to discuss some recent developments that are going on in the Middle East and how extremely dangerous and sensitive these moves are to everyone's life that's in the United States and around the world right now. And what we're facing is an announcement by Mr. Trump that the PKK is to be destroyed as terrorists. Now, the reason why we don't know what the PKK is because the PKK is a name change from our former allies, the YPG and the YPJ. Now, the YPG and the YPJ are the small, tiny, little bitty dirt villages that are left in Syria and in the border areas of Turkey that they share. Okay? Now, these individuals were on the news, as you remember, way back when, where American soldiers said they were no boots on the ground, and yet a gentleman sent in video pictures of U.S. soldiers wearing YPJ emblems on YPJ uniforms and were actively involved in the fight. Now, at the time when we were not friends with Turkey, there were a number of terrorist groups that were smuggling huge amounts of oil. And we saw the videos of the trains and the tankers and the bills that were discovered as different terrorist hideouts were being captured, showing the absolute transporting and smuggling of huge shipments of lost and stolen oil through areas in Turkey and by terrorists that the government sanctioned to basically do this as their trucking stations and movers for a huge amount of oil and oil money. At the time when oil was over $100 a gallon, we see receipts for $10 a gallon. This was stolen and sold to the first dealer, and then you get all the other middlemen involved, and there you go. It was a huge, absolutely huge operation. Well, the most kind and generous Mr. Erdogan has decided that he likes that operation and the terrorists that were involved as far as how they work together and their splits with the stolen and smuggled oil and such. And so he has decided that if you want my friendship, as he tends to be a tad fickle and jumping back and forth between who is his favorite ally of the week, he was given incredible amounts of money by U.S. and NATO forces to take in immigrants and that kind of thing, and then demanded more money. And the situation is constantly on a volatile up and down scale, particularly in that country with Mr. Erdogan currently being in charge. And I believe he's sincerely trying to get to a spot where he can recognize a powerful and loyal world leader and will submit to that. He shot down the Russian pilot and has since come back and begged for forgiveness to the man's family and to the Russian people for what he did. And he's liking the amount of loyalty that he has seen displayed by Russia towards the Syrian people. So that part of it is good. The part of it that is bad, however, is these tiny little villages on their border. Now, these are little tiny dirt road towns, and a grandpa and maybe a mom that's left and a couple tiny children and maybe one person in each family that's like a female of 16, 17, 18 years old. And they're going to battle to save the grandfathers, these very older and sickly gentlemen, from having to go to war. So you got these girls packing on these uniforms and going to little camps and learning how to use a weapon. And these are the YPJs. And that's why it was particularly all over the news when the American soldiers were wearing YPJ patches on camo outfits, obviously of their military uniform, because they were wearing the female version of the same group. YPG is men and YPJ is women. And the moment that the US entered into interactions with Erdogan and what he wanted, he said, I want you to bomb this little group on the north. They are a constant thorn in my side and causing me a lot of trouble with my oil moving and operations and trading with other people, even though it's smuggled and stolen oil. And the US said, okay. And they ran up there and bombed the YPG and the YPJ. And they're going, wait. Don't bomb us, US. We're your allies. We're your helpers. We're helping get rid of this terrorist in this region, and we're saving our grandparents back in our home little dirt villages. And they had no notice of their change of status, that they are no longer friends of America and have suddenly become the PKK terrorist operation, because Erdogan says, well, I'll be your friend if you go and do this dirty little deed over here. I mean, it's so reminiscent of, drug operations in the 70s and 80s, where when you wanted to get rid of your competition or your threat or somebody who was against you, you just went and thanked to the police on them and hoped that they did the cleanup work for you. And that's what has happened now between Turkey and the United States. And this is incredibly dangerous to all Americans everywhere, because we will no longer have any loyal allies anywhere in the world if they see that kind of a fickle relationship that the American bounces back and forth between. Okay? And we see examples of this when in the campaigning Trump said that China's raping us and taking all of our jobs and our companies and our this and our that. And actually, with that obliteration as rank and file, the wording seems to be offending people. When you have a bailout of the auto system and money is given by Obama to the Chinese to build 8 brand spanking new automotive plants in China. This was not a bailout to the American auto industry, the American company that completely obliterated, demolished, and abandoned Dearborn and other areas of Michigan. The place was evacuated. Everyone lost their homes. Entire cities and towns were empty because the jobs were gone. The plants were closed. The money was shipped to China to build 8 brand new plants. If we had money to build 8 brand new automotive plants in the United States, our people would not be starving right now. Our children in school would not be being shamed with markers on their arms saying this person doesn't have any lunch money. And all of a sudden, Dearborn is now active and happy and busy. Why? Because empty cities became the perfect place to buy zillions of houses of very cheap pennies on the dollar for, you guessed it, the immigrant population that Obama wished to stuff in there and hide. Okay? Which, when you've got radios blaring on every street corner 5 times a day, supposed prayers or chants of Islam and Muslim people, that property was stolen from the people that worked there, that deserved that money to go into brand spanking new plants for all the years they had to put up with degrading conditions and unsafe buildings and equipment, and living on the edge with their families starving and trying desperately they could to clutch to anything to save their homes. Why weren't they rewarded with that money? But during the campaign, don't forget that Ivanka traveled to China and doubled the applications for patents and brands in the country. Went from something like 17 to 37. We're rounding up numbers, but you get the general idea. The campaign time was spent doubling all of her brands and things to get ready to monetarily pillage plants in China with product that would bear her name. Perfumes and purses and makeups and designer clothes and such. So our stance toward China definitely has changed. And I consider it absolute blasphemy to sit at dinner, and it wasn't chocolate cake. It was a 7-layer with icing devil's food cake. Okay, that's the pun here. When he asked G, somebody walks in and says, well, our ships are ready to fire. Shall we fire? So it takes a long while for ships to come and get in position and get the men moved and the equipment moved. So the timing of just as dessert is served and they're enjoying this delectable delicacies, that he says to Zing, or Z, sorry, G, what is your opinion? Do you think we should bomb? Here, I'll just say yes and push this little button and we'll feel the power of vengeance throttling beneath us. Why wasn't Congress asked? Why wasn't the American people asked? It took a long time to get that in position. You know, those ships were sitting there for 3 days. But yet, right as dessert starts, the man comes in with this big announcement. They are now ready to fire. Shall we fire, sir? Just to have, Z see this demonstration of power and authority. Well, they sit and smile and nod because they're extremely polite people. Very, very nice, kind, and polite, and would not offend or anything. But to do this to him was a huge, defecation on top of his character. To put him into that position was seen as extremely heinous and thoughtless. So he goes back home, and the news starts immediately blasting Trump. He changes his mind more than most people change their underwear, and so forth and so on. It was not appreciated in the manner that a drama queen person might have intended that to come across. So, as we start changing our mind that YPG and YPJ are now the PPKK terrorists, they're little girls, 17, 18, with rifles, trying to protect their village so grandpa doesn't have to go to war. And we were working together and firing together, and all of a sudden, boom, a bomb drops on them and obliterates these people. Our allies and such around the world are going to see that time after time after time, our characterization of people, of Erdogan, of the Syrians, of YPJ, YPK, of the PKK, of China, of the XYZ, it's just getting insane. According to, what Trump needs to do personally at the time. Okay? He was in office 24 hours when he signed an executive order, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but it sends a huge, powerful message to all the militaries, all the nation, and all the nations around us to do the XL pipeline. Why did he do that? One day in office, he hasn't even looked at the situation. Well, it might be because the guy that wants not oil, but highly corrosive sands that has a little bit of dirty oil around it to be shoved down a pipe 3,000 miles to an existing plant in Texas, wash up the sand, steal what oil they can off it, and then do what with the sand? Dump it into the Gulf and destroy all of our wildlife? Create beachfront property for some derelict marsh that Trump just happened to buy a week ago? Or what? Okay? We are obliterating with that act, which was the repayment of a campaign contribution to the pipeline recipient, and not because it can't be done anywhere else, but because he wanted to rape the land for the money now, instead of waiting the 4 years that engineers have said it would take to build a sand cleaning plant up on the Canadian border. So we're going to take sand out of Canada and ship it to Texas because we don't want to wait for the money. What about the millions and millions of Americans that have waited 8 years to see infrastructure and jobs? Okay, instead, we're preparing tax cut bills because those will stimulate the economy. Well, you know what? The only people paying taxes are somewhere in the middle, and at least they have the job. The people at the top have so much money and so many tax havens and loopholes that they're not paying anything anyway. And if you put a 25% on anything that's outside of this country, whether it's the marketing or the selling or the cute little sales girls or the manufacturing or the taking of raw materials or the people that are building or making or putting together the product, if you put taxes on every company that's outside of the U.S. for any phase of it, and put that tax on every single phase that's outside of the U.S., those puppies would run home 10 times faster than they left, and everyone would have a job. But we're turning on, in the XL Pipeline case, the sovereign Indian nations. Now, these people happen to be, in the North Dakotas area, the poorest, if not one of the most poorest, Indian nations around. Okay? Their treaty says that you can't fix up anything. Because if you do, you lose your treaty. So when these people first got the treaty, they were living in their teepees. And they acquiesced to, all right, we'll build a shed to put in our crops that you're going to make us grow so we can have a little bit of corn in a couple of months. So they built like a one-room structure, not 5 bedrooms and 2 baths and a bidet on this side and a jacuzzi on the other and that kind of thing. No, it was a basic one-room house where they could stock in boxes of supplies or bags of corn that they had collected or whatever and not sold. Now, since then, which is like 1890-ish, depending on the areas, you have that guy's kids, and there's 4 or 5 of them, and then their spouses and their children, and then their spouses and their children. You now have 5 whole families calling that one-room shack their house. And a window breaks, they can't fix it. And the paint wears off, they can't repaint it. They're scared to death that if they do any fixing or updating or adding on a house for grandma to live next door, that they'll lose their treaty. They are absolutely the poorest Indians you've ever met in the universe. And now suddenly it's okay to run a pipe that will leak under the river. How do you go under a river? As soon as you go under the river, you're hitting groundwater, you're hitting other rocks and support mechanisms. The earthquakes in Oklahoma have increased 100-fold. Where there used to be one, every 3 months or so, there's now, in some places, up to 100 a day, they're saying. Because of all the fracking and the drilling and the things that we're doing to rape the land from what little assets there are. And don't forget, in order to do this, they're taking how many millions of gallons of water and shoving it in the earth, trying to make the oil rise to the surface. You got people in Peru that haven't had fresh water out of a faucet in 10 years. And we're taking beautiful clean water and shoving it into the ground to try to force the oil to rise. And it's cracking the crud out of all the substratas, ruining, thousands of years of artifacts and bones and records and the very structure of the rock itself in order to try to get oil to seep to the surface. And what little oily sand you get, you're going to stick in a pipe, which is a highly corrosive more than oil would be if you were shoving oil in that same pipeline, and ship it down to Texas and clean it up. Now, I'm sure that if he paid proper raises to those guys, they could build a whole new cleaning facility in 1 year on the Canadian border and do all their sand cleaning right there. But the gentleman doesn't want to wait 4 years, even though we've had to wait 8 years for a guy who said he was going to bring back infrastructure and jobs. And here's the key topper of them all. He has scheduled to go to Arabia to make deals with them and sell them the weapons that Obama and everybody else before would never give to the Arabians. And they're going to obliterate the shit out of not just Yemen, but wait until the first time is we don't send an arms sale. Wait till the first time is somebody stands up at the UN and says, why are you on the Women and Human Rights Council when your women are beat and killed in the streets as an example to all the other women? where they're not allowed to go into colleges, public places, drive a car, go into a government office. They're not allowed to be in those spots, which means you get beat up, you can't go to the police station and complain. You can't drive to get there. You can't talk to the guy once you get there. You can't go in the college next door to learn a job so that you can support yourself. That's it, baby. You were sold by your uncle when you were 5 years old, and that's it. And the burqa, by the way, is not Islamic clothing. Okay? I can prove it. Hold on 1 second. This is a picture of Afghanistan in 1972. You see the purses, the big clunky high heels, the mini skirts, the makeup, the unbuttoned top blouse. They were wearing exactly the same fashions that we were, San Jose and Berkeley and stuff like that, in 1972. This is Kabul, Afghanistan. Now this is the same town today. Notice these ugly, huge robes and giant robes on top of the robes where the head should be, and that you can't see through to see the eyes or anything else. They're heavy. They're dark. You're talking about a desert community where it's hot. And this is what the women are forced to wear. And do you want to know why the women are forced to wear that there? Because the Quran teaches if you think your wife is not going to be good to you, you deprive her of food and sex and clothes, and you put her in a dark room by herself for as long as she thinks, and you beat the crap out of her if you think she's not going to be satisfying to you. So these clothes have nothing to do with religion and everything to do with hiding bruises, hiding beatings. There have been interviews done with women in various countries, and when they say, ISIL came in and took us, and they forced us to wear burqas and headdresses and all this stuff, and they say, well, and they were asked, now this is the YPJ area that borders Syria and Turkey, and they were asked, why did they come in and the first thing they wanted to do was have you wear burqas? Well, they were selling us as sex slaves in the markets. And the reason why the men want people to wear things like that is because, and the lady pulled her sleeve down, and just beyond her nice, beautiful face and her cute little hands were bruises all over her body where the clothing covers it. And that's why these people are made to do this. But Obama is right now, Trump is right now, my apologies, Obama, on his way to Arabia, the worst human rights and women's rights place on the earth, to sell awful and disgusting and very, very powerful, our most powerful weapons to Arabia. Okay? And this is something that no other president, no matter how bad anybody thought of them, ever did. They're going to walk in that door and decide to build 100 million, one person said, and then the other reporter corrected them and said, no, that's not million, that's B with a billion. $100 billion worth of the worst weapons on the earth. And although they're saying 100 billion, what they're already saying is they really probably mean 300 billion. And when it gets right down to brass tacks, over the next 10 years, it'll actually amount to $1 trillion. They will be the strongest arms race force on the planet. But guess what happened in the last 10 months? While Obama was on the campaign tour, he had discussions with Arabia and opened over there 8 new sites for giant, Trump, magnificent, luxurious hotel resorts. While he was on the campaign trail, he's already figuring how to trade $1 trillion worth of weapons and blasting Yemen off the planet so Saudi can get to their oil. While a minute Every 10 minutes, a child dies in Yemen. And 80% of the children there do not know where their next meal will come from and will probably die before breakfast. And Obama's over there negotiating for 8 brand new resorts at the cost of, what, hundreds of thousands of lives? And $1 trillion worth of weapons? And since he has stocks in those same companies, I see another both ethical and monetary conflict of interest coming up. And the fact that no other country on this world can no longer trust America. Before, they just hated us for the weapons and the wars that are going on right now in 8 countries that the American people don't even know about. But now the ones that are left, the ones that worked with us, the ones that did like us, can no longer trust us. So please write your senator, your congressman, your governor, and tweet the president, yes. Write me at buffalostudy@yahoo.com. My tweet is exposed conspiracy, drop the final Y, or P.O. Box 31, Big Bear Lake, California. If you can at all support this work and this ministry, yes, there is a tremendous amount of expenses and persecution involved in this. Please send a donation to paypal.me/buffalostudy@yahoo.com. And my name is Miss Ellie Blair White. Thank you so much. Have a great day. God bless and say prayers. Our leaders are under attack. Thank you.